very pleasant good day to all of our viewers. Welcome to another edition of Marriage Encounter. We are delighted to be with you on the airways of Second Advent Radio. And of course, to those of you who are joining us via our social media platforms, we welcome you just the same. With me today, as usual, is Pastor Staton Adams, and we are here to share another exciting edition of Marriage Encounter. Before we get started, we would like to invite you just to bow your heads for a word of prayer. Shall we pray? Father, we give you thanks for the privilege and opportunity to share with our friends on this continuing study as we look at how we can seek to improve relationships within marriage, and specifically as we speak to the issue of boundary and those individuals who struggle with boundaries. Guide all deliberations and our discussions today in Jesus' name. Amen.
Greene.
Pastor Adams, good day.
Good day, Dr. Greene, and good day again to our viewing and listening audience. We are delighted to be with you once again to continue our very informative and important discussion on this area of boundaries and resolving conflicts in our relationships.
Yeah, so last week, Pastor, we were talking to the issue of individuals who struggle with boundaries, and we explored several areas. We looked at empathic failure, we looked at irresponsibility, we looked at the inability to receive limits and to stay free. And we started discussing the matter of the control of others. We said some very interesting things about individuals who have this desire to control others. And I remember us making the point that when a spouse is controlling, I'm getting a little feedback there. Just let me see. We made a point, Pastor, that when a spouse seeks to control the other, that it is not just the individual who he or she is hurting, but he or she is hurting him or herself in the process, because when you try to control others, you are imprisoning your own self and limiting your own freedom to some extent.
Yes, exactly. And I think I made the point that when you do that, you yourself, you are not free. and we are talking about the freedom and respecting the freedom of each other. So you are not free yourself, because we were making the point that everybody has a right to their own freedom, their own opinion, their own ideas. And if I am going to try to control you, whether passively, or aggressively, that is not intimate forming. But that is rather, I want to introduce another term, that is intimate destroying behavior. It is intimate destroying behavior, because the mere fact that I'm trying to control you and don't allow you to express your point of view, your opinion, is stymieing the process of intimacy. Because if intimacy is based on communication and on our ability to discuss and resolve conflicts in this relationship, then taking that position of control is stymieing the whole process. And remember, I said some time back that every stage of the relationship, every stage of the marriage and family life cycle requires for us to keep the intimacy intact, even when we're not agreeing. Intimacy is not jeopardized because we're not agreeing on a particular issue. So we talk to the issue and get it resolved, but the intimacy is still intact because I still value you, I still value you, I still have respect for you, and I still have respect for your opinion and your point of view. You see, so and sometimes a lot of couples cannot do that because we have not because we've been saying all along that when we are dealing with the conflicts and situation, we are actually measuring at the same time whether we are growing or maturing as it relates to our dealing and treating with difficulties and hardship. In fact, all relationships have difficulties and hardships. Successful relationship just didn't happen. They had to navigate, negotiate challenges, difficulties, you see. And so but at the end of the day, when you can go through those things and respect each other's feelings and point of view and opinion, that aids in the process of bringing you closer to each other and guaranteeing the process of intimacy going on. Because remember, I said some time ago, it is never a point or a place where we arrived at. It's not a destination, it's a process that is ongoing all the time. So we have to look at not just the behavior of the person who is seeking to control, but how the consequences it has for the relationship for both persons and for the relationship altogether.
That is so correct, Pastor. And I want to address the matter of the ultimate effects of control, because controlling others in a relationship is really we already said causing the other to lose their freedom, and even the individual who is seeking to exercise control, but it is making the marriage operate out of the sphere of what God intended. And that individual who is exercising control, manipulating, and sometimes seeking to make themselves God in the process because they're always right, it's always their way. That individual really does need help, does need serious help. And the way we deal with this ultimately is that we sometimes talk about consequences, consequential action. The individual may need to be warned. The individual may need to be challenged to seek intervention. You're in a marriage and your spouse is so controlling that it is creating a challenge. The individual has to wake up to the reality of his or her issue. And sometimes you do need outside intervention. If the challenges, the warnings, the consequences, listen, if you don't do this, this is what is going to happen. And unfortunately, sometimes people may even have to withdraw emotionally. And I may say sometimes even physically. I've had couples, Pastor, where I have had to ask that there be physical distance so that we can work on the issue of control. Some individuals need to withdraw and get help. It's kind of like, if I use this rough illustration, you're in a house with 5 individuals and you develop a particular disease, it's a contagious disease. If you do not withdraw, isolate, get treatment, and recover, and then rejoin the household, then it's going to destroy everybody and everybody will get sick in the process. So sometimes individuals have to take drastic actions in order to save the relationship. Just unmute there.
But that controlling behavior is not just controlling behavior, you have to see it for what it is. That is abusive behavior. And that is a no-no in relationships
Definitely.
because abuse, control is a form of abuse. And it affects the other person emotionally and psychologically. You see, that controlling behavior affects the spouse, whoever it is, the husband or the wife, because both people can want to exercise that kind of control, exhibit that kind of control. So it affects the other person both emotionally and psychologically. You
Correct.
see, It also affects their functioning in that relationship as a separate individual. It and emotional and psychological in the sense where it affects the person, how they see themselves, how they value themselves, their self-worth. And so, I God made me, as you said, that's not for the purpose as a free moral agent. And now I'm in this relationship and I cannot exercise my God-given right of freedom. Um, Even when God made us and put the four spirit together, He gave them the right to choose freedom. Even when they made the bad choice, God still didn't take away the freedom. They have to deal with the consequences, yes, but man is still free. And so if the marriage is a spectacle, if the marriage is an exhibit of what freedom means, and we could go to Ephesians, right? How God deals with his church. And Paul is saying that that is it should mirror or reflect that kind of a relationship, you see. So if we want the relationship, the marriage to reflect what God intended, then nobody should assume the posture of wanting to control and to manipulate the other person. You see, that is itself is a form of it's abusive behavior. And like you rightly said, if the person should withdraw from that situation, and the person who is controlling need professional help, because there could be something that is driving that controlling behavior. That person may need clinical help indeed.
I was saying, Pastor, a lot of times the reality is that one thing leads to another. So
Mhm.
the controlling may be on the level of initially an individual wanting his way all the time, his commands, his desires, his aspirations, at the expense of the wife's freedom to have an opinion. But it may also eventually lead to, now, of course, you did say it's abuse, right? So there's a lot of emotional abuse there, but it can also lead to physical abuse because should the spouse not respond, this individual, or if, the spouse begins to recognize and begins to say, hey, I'm going to stand up to this, I'm not going to allow this, the individual may try to say, let me demonstrate who is the dominant partner here and may resort to physical violence. So it's pretty dangerous, and one thing can lead to another. And it really does make sense for people to listen to one another, to
Mhm.
come to the relationship understanding that each partner has an opinion, and we owe ourselves the good fortune of allowing our spouse to share um, the way they view us and how they feel about our interactions with them. That is pretty important. When we do that, we are effectively saying, listen, I am human and I realize I can make mistakes. And this leads us to the next point that I want to raise. In fact,
Mhm.
is some persons keep denying that they have imperfections as though they're angels. We are all human beings. We have imperfections. And if we don't understand and appreciate that, then we are going to have a challenge in our relationships, not just
Mhm.
our marriage, but in any meaningful relationship, because you cannot be right all the time.
Yeah. And before you said something in the previous point that I don't want our listeners to miss, even though I didn't mention it, I'm glad that you went there, that almost all the time, that kind of a controlling um, emotional, psychological abuse leads to physical violence, indeed, almost all the time. So I don't want us to miss that time. In fact, when we are dealing with even with dating violence, we are asking people who are in dating relationships to look at those. There are some telltale, there are some signs that a person may possibly be an abusive mate. So I don't want us to, because I know that not only married people, but you might also be talking to a premarital audience in the broadcast. And just want for the education purpose to make that point to say that that is one thing, that is one red flag you should look for if somebody's trying to control you in that dating relationship, even before you are married. That is a warning sign. Yes, that's the warning sign. So let's go back. And relationships, marriage is about selflessness. You have to come with a selfless altruism. It's a
Before you go
selfless
on to
altruism.
Before you go on to that point, Pastor Adams, I mean, very important. We're going to get back there, but I want to follow up on what you just said, which was a follow up on what I said before. But it really is important because you're saying that individuals who are dating, uh,
Mm-hmm.
they need to be mindful. There needs to be this awareness that,
Yes.
hey, listen, um, they need to be able to pick up signs that their
Yes.
partner maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe exhibiting um
Mm-hmm.
you know this element of control. Now here's
Yes.
the situation, and this is what I want to raise before we go any further. What I want to raise is the matter of an individual who has been desiring to get married for so long and felt that every relationship I get into, something happens and it slips away. And so there is some degree of desperation on the part of an individual. I'm being practical because these are things that happen in real life. And so this individual eventually gets into what appears to be a meaningful relationship, looks as though this one is going to work out. And then somewhere along the line, now they begin to detect that maybe this person is a little controlling, but they are afraid to speak up because they think it might end the relationship. And that is what I want to highlight here. If you see something that bothers you, it is important to address it, even if it means that you are not going to continue the relationship. You are better off spotting, detecting an issue, and dealing with it, even if it ends the relationship, than to continue and get married and afterwards discover that you're in a situation with a controlling slash abusive spouse. That can be really, really challenging. And so I wanted to just go back to that to say how important it is. Don't overlook these signs, these red flags, we call them, when you see
Mm-hmm.
something happening. Because I know a lot of times people are in, you're counseling a couple and you point out to them, hey, this is a challenge, I'm really concerned about it. And a lot of times they want to downplay it. Sometimes you have to sit down with one individual by himself or herself and say, listen, let's talk about this, and get deeper. And I've had people who come back to me afterwards and thank me for saving their future because otherwise they would have been in a real miserable situation.
So you cannot be so desperate that you do not make a decision that is sensible. So, um, and I also want to sound a further one word of caution if people who are premaritals in relationships heading towards marriage, even if you are engaged, engagement can be broken. And even if you're at the altar, you can change your mind because marriage doesn't necessarily change a man. A person can even promise you they will change. No, getting married doesn't necessarily change the person or change the behavior. Right. You see, so it is not a recipe um, for cure for loneliness. No, no, no. Right. So it can turn out to be miserable. So exercise some control, and if you have to change your mind or change the decision, that's all well and good. Because it's better to be single and happy than to be married and miserable. I would normally tell young people.
I like the way you put it there just now, and it's a very good point to illustrate how we deal with this matter of control. You just said exercise some control, and I thought, hey, we're talking about not controlling others. Um,
Mhm.
what you ought to be able to do is to control your own feelings, your own emotions. You ought to be
Yes.
able to take control of your reactions to certain things and
Exactly.
recognize when you need to make adjustments here or there,
Right.
not seek to control the other person. Because we're talking about boundaries. And we're saying
Mm.
that there's some things that belong to you. Your behavior belongs to you. You must control
Yes.
that. You must
Mhm.
not seek to control your spouse's thoughts, actions, etc. That is the responsibility of your spouse. And so now we're not suggesting that you ought to be 100% satisfied with how your spouse behaves, but the changing of your spouse's behavior is your spouse's responsibility, not
Yes.
responsibility.
Yes.
And that's the idea.
Yes. Exactly. So imperfections, and I think we have mentioned that already on our program, while the institution is perfect, and anything that God puts into being, because marriage is not a concoction of the state, marriage was ordained by God from the beginning. And whatever God has set up, He has set it up for the blessings and for the glory of His name and for the blessings of mankind, humanity, His creation that He has made. But because of the problem of sin and our fallenness and our brokenness, all of us have imperfections. So the institution is perfect. But we who enter the institution, we are not perfect. So nobody should take a position or a stand of perfection. I am superior to you. I am not your equal. I'm in a class by myself, and I am the benchmark. You have to reach up to where I am. No, no, no. Um, I did say some time back again that it is two imperfect people coming here together, and it's until when we move from the altar. And I should make another a very powerful quotation from one of my authors. It is at the marriage hour that we quote either our happiness or unhappiness by the choice we make, right? So while we are choosing, we are not looking for Mr. Right or Mistress Right because we can never find such a person. The person must have the raw material, the character traits, the personality that in sync with or that we're compatible with, that we're looking for in order to make a decision. But when all of those things are going for you, we must understand still that the person is not perfect still, you see. And so we can see some things and find out some things, even after when we say I do, right? So when those imperfections show up, it's not necessarily that we have made the wrong choice, but how do we treat with those imperfections? Um, I mean, imperfection, we're not talking about things that are destructive to marriage and family life and the relationships, right? When we talk about imperfection, we're not relating to those things. We are talking about maybe some personality issues that we may have, some flaws and so here and there, these things, right? And so we can grow. These are imperfections that we can correct, that we can grow, you know, and that the grace of God can help us to grow and overcome, you see. So all of us come with those.
Well,
But
Pastor, the truth is, I may dare say that imperfections can be helpful. I was listening a few days ago, this very week, to a program on the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation. And they were talking about the challenges. I'm cognizant of the fact that we only have about 2 minutes remaining, 3 minutes remaining. So I'm going to make this point.
already,
Yes, but it is an important point to what, just to heighten what you're saying there. And they were talking about the challenges of the current era where people are not playing outside as much as they ought to, babies, etc.
mm,
And they did some research to discover that if a child can be exposed to a little dirt, D-I-R-T, and
mm,
maybe a puppy, right? A puppy that can go outside and run around and come back in with some bacteria and that kind of thing. to the
Mm.
baby, that makes the baby, they say that there's a 30% positive increase in resistance towards things like asthma for that baby when the baby
Mm.
is exposed to those kinds of imperfection, dirt, you know,
Mm.
and the bacteria. So the imperfections I'm talking about in our relationships with our spouses, they are good for us. They help us to grow. I'm strengthening the point that you're making. If your
Yes.
spouse never disagrees with anything you say, that's pretty dangerous to you. You know, you
Yes.
begin to think that you're perfect and you really aren't. And
Mm.
you begin to feel that, you know, you have it right, you have it made in heaven. It's important sometimes for you to be
Mm.
flawed, for you to have the opportunity to reflect and look up and say, hey, listen, you know, I need to do better here and there.
Right. Yes. Mhm. Yes. It is a strength. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
It is.
Now, I know you were making a point and I interrupted. We have 1 minute to wrap up. So go ahead.
Yeah, but I was making the point that that is the work of marriage. And in that sense, it is a strength. It is the work of marriage that we are able to watch each other grow and overcome these imperfections. And that is the strength of marriage. That is the strength of the unity, because that is why the two of us have become one. And so we benefit each other in a symbiotic way, you know. So yes, it is a strength. So it is how we see it. We don't see imperfection as something negative altogether, but we see that as strength, where both of us can use this as an opportunity to see how we can help each other grow. And in the process, we grow the relationship and we grow the marriage, and we are making the family what it ought to be.
Well, excellent place to stop. We will continue next week. You know, half an hour goes by so quickly on this
Very
program.
quickly.
And we do invite you to join us again next week and to share with somebody else that you know there are lots of good things happening in Marriage Encounter. If you have questions, comments, concerns, the email address is marriageencounter@slcadventist.org. That is marriage encounter, all one word, marriageencounter@slcadventist.org. That's all the time we have for today, but we will be back next week with another encounter. God bless you.